This is the meat of what we wanted to say. I'm reminded of this about twice a day, so now we're going to talk about this. Okay, the Chazaka versus Kibush thing. Rabbi Ariel writes here. You see this? This is what do you accomplish by going to the Temple Mount? The 5 mitzvahs, right? Sorry, let's say it outside. So it's not here in the Makbili. But I remember being told, for example, they got a heter once upon a time to change the route on the Temple Mount to go to the places that are normally forbidden, right? And also Feigelin's, the heter, whoever gave it to him, to go into the Dome of the Rock. Kibush, right? Asserting ourselves on the Temple Mount, there's a mitzvah of kibush. What's the problem I have with that? How's it kibush? How's it? You are being allowed to go there by armed people who are then going to kick you out. It seems that the people who are dictating to you where you can go and when you could go and how you could go, and they have the force, they have the muzzle of the gun in your back telling you what to do. They seem to be the kovshim, the conquerors or the occupiers, and you're just there. They're just giving you a little bit of a chesed for a few minutes, right? The fact, even now, hundreds of Jews on the Temple Mount, Kain Yirbu, lots and lots of them. Is that a kibush? No, it's not, because the Rambam in 2 places brings this distinction based on, by the way, Shas. The Rambam says that's called Khazaka. Okay? The Rambam says, let's read this here. In first, he says in Zerayim, we're going to see it in. Talking about this earlier this week. Remember? Okay. The Rambam says that here, whatever the Oli Mitzrayim, Joshua's time, whatever they held, okay, and was sanctified the first time around, like Eretz Yisrael, once they were exiled, that sanctity somehow was eliminated. That first sanctification, because it was done through kibush, conquest only, was only for that era specifically, and not for future eras. And then the Rambam continues, once the exiles came back and held on to the land, at least parts of it, parts of it, they sanctified it forever, right? A second time around, for then and forevermore. Okay? Olei Bavel Kishayu. And they left sort of the state that they were placed within Eretz Yisrael that were not fully sanctified, so that there are places where they could technically not have to observe Shemitah, so that they'd be able to get food. So let's understand this. The Rambam first said over here in the second halacha that Eretz Yisrael Hamurah B'chol Makom Hi Aratzos Shekavashothan Melech Yisrael Shofeto Navi Midat Rov Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is the places that have been conquered. Okay? First of all, you have to conquer it in order for it to be considered Eretz Yisrael. And by the way, that's a quote from Yerushalmi. I'll read it over here, that they say, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim Mishum Rabbi Lezer ben Pidaf Shamar Mishum Rabbi Lezer ben Shemua Harbei Krachim Kavishu Ole Mitzrayim Velo Kivashum Ole Bavel. There are a lot of places that are conquered by those who came up from Egypt, but not conquered by those who came out of Bavel. Okay, then remember, that's the word. Even the people of Bavel did a sort of conquest. The verb is used for both of them, right?
When you live in cities and you have guards, and
yeah. Because Savri Kidushari Shana Kidshalati Lishata Velo Kidshalati Levo. And he holds that first sanctification was for then, but not for the future. V'nichum Kadeshi Smuch Alihem Aniyim B'Shvid Veshan Hayu Meotam Sheinichum. And once again, there are exceptional places that were Eretz Yisrael the first time around and not the second time around. Okay? Now, first of all, the Rambam has, for our purposes, the Rambam has made a distinction. There's kibush, and then there's just the chazaka. The people in Ezra's time, by the way, Ezra was one of the latecomers, they just did chazaka. That's what I'm trying to tell people on the Temple Mount. I'm 100% for this. I believe that, by the way, if you ask, what is the plan? As a rabbi here was asking, what is Rabbi Weber and Rabbi Wolfson? What's their plan? They're going to somehow take over and build the Beis HaMikdash? What in practice are they going to do? They're just going to keep davening more and more? And I told him, yes, the point is to just make the place Jewish and just keep doing and doing and doing, and eventually it'll be Jewish. They're doing chazaka. They're not doing kibush. Kibush would be like Matasyahu and Yudah Maccabee did. Matasyahu wasn't there at the time. But you understand, taking it by force, that's kibush. They're not doing that. They're doing chazaka, which, by the way, might be just as good, if not better. But the Rambam said initially that Eretz Yisrael first has to have kibush. That's something you had to have done. So what's this chazaka? We're going to read the footnote over here. We're going to read Makbili's footnote, and we're going to read the note we read earlier, so we could bring out where the question lies. And we're going to see something that Rav Kapach answered, and others say this is a very difficult question. We have to figure out the halachic mechanism exactly, because the Rambam's saying, and the answer, by the way, is something we're learning now, the Rambam is saying something very important. He's saying somehow kibush alone, that's what they did. He said that in Joshua's time, that could solely be nullified, and therefore the sanctity that was imparted to the land can be removed by someone else conquering the land, right? But Ole Bavel just stay there and hang on, and the Kedusha lasts, even though, by the way, the Ole Bavel were exiled also. The Romans came and took away their Chazaka. So why didn't that ruin the Kedusha of the land? Good question, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's a really good question. By the way, there are a lot of Achronim asked this question. Let's leave the footnote inside. Now, we're reading the footnote just because they did the work for us, but there's still a lot to talk about. And then we'll read something that Makbili wrote. He starts to get closer to the answer. But the Rambam, I think, you just have to read between the lines of what Rambam's saying. Okay? When he introduces a third concept, based on Mikdash. The Rambam has talked about first Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, the second Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, and then he's going to talk about Kedusha Mikdash. And that's where the key is. You following? Mm-hmm. Good. Let's do this. I'll read it here. Kedusha Shniya Homeneth L'Olam. They sanctified it forever. Okay? They gave it a sanctity that lasts forever. Okay? Here they said, Kadesh Kedusha Rishonah Me'achar Sha'aretz Nichbisha Halal Le'akdusha. Okay? Once the land was conquered, the sanctity applied to it. So they say, B'digud L'Kedushat Olei Mitzrayim She'batila, or She'butla Ima Galuth, as opposed to the sanctity imparted by those who came out of Egypt, those who were ascended from Egypt, that was basically canceled out. It was nullified because of the exile, or in the wake of the exile, the Babylonian exile. Kedusha zo shel olei Bavel, this sanctity of those who came back from Bavel, omedeth le'olam, lasts forever. Even though that commonwealth came to an end also pretty quickly. All right? The base of Mikdash was destroyed, they were also taken to exile. So that's the difference. V'atam hu b'pnei she'olei Mitzrayim hechilu et chiyuva mitzvot al haaretz al yidei kibush. It's because those who came up from Egypt, I guess, okay, or caused the sanctity to come into legal power. Okay? They made it somehow. It's a very technical term, by the way. There's no legal term in Western laws to apply the sanctity, right? They don't recognize this type of thing. Okay, al aretz al yidei kibush v'kevan shenilkacha aretz behem batel kibush. They applied it through conquest, so Nebuchadnezzar's conquest removes that, okay, and the sanctity. Lumatzot ole Ezra kitchu et aretz bechazaka shechziku ba v'hit kifa leolam. In Ezra's time, they just had to hold on to the land. They came there and they held on to the land, and that makes it last forever. I would say, wait, if the conquerors lost their sanctity because they had it conquered away from them, so the machzikim would lose their sanctity they applied to land by someone else coming and making a chazaka on the land. Romans, for example. What's the technical difference? Okay, so the mechanisms were different. The mechanism, this kibush was that way, and this kibush was that way. But why would one kedusha last more than the other? Is there a thing that says? Is there, let's say, a Talmudic statement or a pasuk that says, if you sanctify the land through conquest, that kind of sanctity can be removed by a Gentile conquest. But if you sanctify the land by chazaka, which by the way just means holding on to the land, it could never be removed forever. And by the way, we're going to see this inside. Someone's going to say, wait a minute, but in Joshua's time they did both. They conquered and then they held on to it. You know? Yeah. So they held on to it, so that shouldn't have been nullified. Yes, the conquest part was nullified, but the holding on to it wasn't. Or eventually it was. Well, yeah, they held on to it even better. But not only that, you haven't told me why. This type of possession of the land somehow is weaker than this type of possession, but you're not explaining how. Not only that, I would have said the opposite. If you conquered it with force, so you held on to it, I don't know. It's a little bit difficult. No one, and we don't have a source as to why. But that apparently that's the assumption here in the Talmud also. Like I said, the Rambam's not making these things up. He's copying it out of his Gemara. Let's continue. Ha'achronim amdu al mahut ha'ivdel shebein kibush l'chazaka. The Achronim, okay, amdu al mahut. That means they actually were wondering what's the difference between conquest and chazaka, which we haven't even defined, just holding on to the land, right? Yesh katvu shekibush na'asa below askama v'akara mehumov. Some wrote that the kibush wasn't done with the agreement and the recognition of the nations. As a matter of fact, they were resisting, right? The conquest meant war. Lumat chazaka shenaset be'ofan misudar umukar, which opposed to the holding on to land in Persian times, that was done in an orderly and recognized manner, right? For example, Ezra came up to the land of Israel with Cyrus's declaration as his agent, by the way. He was given royal letter, blank check, etc., right? Okay. But once again, yes, that is a distinction. You've now made it. It's a chilik, but not mechalik. This was done with the nations, and this was done without them. Oh, so it depends on the Goyim? But if the Goyim were to say today, chas v'shalom, do they get a veto then? They say, you Jews are living in Eretz Yisrael, and we do not approve of this. We somehow do not. We are, the British don't want you to have this land. You cannot have it. Well, can they veto?
We told them to take back some stuff.
Fine. Others say it's how they did the Kiddush. So they Bavel Kidshu Ota B'dibur. Those who came up from Bavel somehow did an official speech. They used speech to declare, this is Eretz Yisrael and it's holy. So that lasts forever. In addition to actually dwelling on the land. And that's why it lasts forever. So why don't Yeshua do that? Yeah. That's what the Radbaz says. Okay? The Olim Mitzrayim didn't do this declaration, apparently. Why did they just do that? That's all it took, Well, how long did this declaration take?
I don't know.
Yeah. So you could go see that other explanations there. And I'm now going to read you something that Makbili wrote over here. Sefer Avoda. He brings up other things. I'm going to read you what Rav Kapach says, and then I'm going to read you what the Rambam says. I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to begin to see an answer, which I think is, the rule is, generally speaking, something I realized when I first discussed similar ideas with Rabbi Rabinovich, and that is, if you cannot find a Talmudic, let's say, sugya, in further what the Rambam's saying, then it's a pasuk in the Torah. Right? Okay. The B'nai Gad, B'nai Reuven thing we discussed last week. How does Rambam know that there's no mitzvah to live in the land of Israel, necessarily? Why does Rambam, that whole parak in Hilchos Melachim, what is the basis for it? Yes, because of the discussion between B'nai Gad and B'nai Reuven. Rambam is basically writing out what Moshe Rabbeinu told them in halachic form. You could live wherever you want in the world, and living in Eretz Yisrael is not one of the big 613, but you cannot accomplish anything if you do not keep that particular. If you not do that, you can't do the rest of the mitzvahs if you don't do so. Okay, so once again, the Maimonidean source is just the Tanakh, what the Tanakh says. That's where I'm going with this. But first, I'll review this. First, what does the Rambam say? What's the halach over here? The Rambam says that the Beis HaMikdash was sanctified once and forever. Okay? What does he say? Why do I say that with regards to the temple and Jerusalem, the initial sanctification was for then and forever? But the sanctity of Eretz Yisrael, the rest of Eretz Yisrael, with regards to the Shemitah year and the tithes and all the other mitzvahs, the sanctification did not last. Because the sanctity of the temple in Jerusalem depends on the divine presence being there. And the divine presence cannot be nullified. Why? It says, I shall make your sanctuaries desolate, but even though they're desolate, they're still your sanctuaries. They're still sanctified. And by the way, the Rambam brought other psukim to this effect at the beginning of this halachic section. Zot menuchati adeyad. God has said, this is it forever. Right? He says about the mikdash. Whereas, aval chiyuva aretz bashpit umasrot eno ela mipnei shehu kibush rabim. The sanctity of the land for these particular commandments depends on the conquest of the masses. Okay? The masses of Am Yisrael. Once the land was taken from them, batel kibush. So the conquest was done. Now it's nullified. It's no longer Eretz Yisrael. They were supposed to conquer it, but once it was conquered by someone else, they lost it. Right? In Ezra's time, the sanctification was they're just holding back onto it. Why wasn't Ezra told to conquer it then? And didn't Joshua also hold on to it? We have that same question. Whatever they held on to that time around was sanctified forever. Okay? And even though the land was taken away from them eventually, and the Jews were sent back into exile. Some or other, the second time around, what they did lasted, but they didn't do the first time around. What they did this first time around didn't last. So I'm going to read you over here. Actually, it's not, because it's beyond the borders of Ole Bavel.
We did Kibush Rabim.
Well, so Rambam talks about the third coming. Okay, what about the third coming?
What you just read, it said that anything that the king conquers, Kibush
Yeah.
Rabim, is
Yeah,
Israel.
so it should be. They didn't do any conquering since David's time, basically. But now they've done reconquering. Rambam doesn't say, but he does say there's supposed to be a third sanctification. They're supposed to do something else. They're supposed to do a reset. Okay, there's supposed to be a great reset in the third Commonwealth. Also, by the way, resetting the clock of how to count true Shemitah years, which they were supposed to do. Remember, we had a shir about that. According to the Rambam, when were they supposed to restart the count of Shemitah and Yovel years? The founding of the state, the British mandate, the founding of the first few British Jewish moshavot. Good question. So look over here. He says, here it says, okay, Kibush Rabim, Shetach Shenichbash B'Shema Am Kulo B'Yuzmat Manhigav. Makbili is very exact, because Rambam says, Melech, Navio, Shofet, etc. Doesn't matter who the leader is, what his official title is. Right? Shofet has an unofficial title. And he continues, Lo kitcha b'kibush ele b'chazaka shechziku ba oli bavel shadon nilchamu aleh ele yashvu ba b'rshuth koresh melech paras. How did they get the land of Israel the second time around? By permission of King Cyrus. Uchvar hitcha betu mefarshim harbei binyan ha'avdel bein kibush levein chazaka. Hitcha betu. What do you say? How do you translate hitcha betu? Okay, whatever. They're having a hard time. The mefarshim can't really explain this to us. No satisfactory answer yet. Why? Kilomar, Madua bikdusha rishona. Why is it that with the first sanctification, bikibush Yeshua benun, the conquest of Joshua, lo ho'ila chazaka shaitan nosaf ala kibush. Joshua conquered and he did the chazaka.
Yeah, for a long time.
Yeah, like you said. Okay. Yesh mi shetalat et adifudat chazaka bazeh shehi maaseh beguf akarka. They must have done something to the land. But what they do the second time, they didn't do the first time. Difficult answer. Melech Paras. It was done with the agreement of the one who is handing over the land. I don't know about that. Losing the war, when they surrender and they lost the war, I think what Adoni Bezek and the rest of them, when those kings lost, right, they sort of had I'm forced into handing over the land to Joshua. Joshua conquered many kings, and he executed them, right? We have the case, for example, that the Havdil, the Jew is supposed to be giving the get, so the Beis Din compels him. We consider that not compulsory. By the time they whack him into it and he says yes, right? He's doing it. Now it's his will to do it. So too, the Canaanites who gave over the land to David and Joshua, or Joshua and David respectively, did it sort of their own volition because they lost, right? So it's a little bit difficult there. Okay. Next, how about this? Be'or acher yesod avdel eno bein kibush levein chazaka ela b'achlatat beit hadin hamekadesh. But the problem is that's not what the Rambam said. They say the difference is how the Beis Din went about doing it, the mechanism that the Beis Din employed to sanctify the land. So why didn't the Rambam say that? And why didn't they just do it right the first time? Yeah, very difficult. Let me say, Kimishtamim al shon b'makom acher kivan shalu b'nei agula ki Yeshua kedusha shtiyah ha'omenet leolam. Somehow or other, the second time around, Ezra's time, they knew how to sanctify it forever. A sanctification that lasts. The shatol etilevo, then and forever. Hakidush b'mim Yeshua haya below achlata mechuvenet lekadesh ta'aretz leolam. Somehow or other, the sanctification that they employed in Joshua's time was not meant to last.
I think they wanted to go in there.
Yeah, well, they would. I don't understand that. And that's why the sanctity was nullified in the wake of the destruction of the temple and the exile of the Jewish people. Ezra Lumatzot somehow did it in the right way. And he used Bemtsut Ma'asel Chati Kinyan Khazaka. Like I said, but Joshua's time did it also. What did Ezra know more than Joshua? So that is the problem I'm having. And now I'd like to show you why the Rambam didn't seem to have such a problem. I'll read you a little bit from Rav Kapach, and then we'll get to what I hope is a cromulent answer. Well, I'm beginning what Rav Kapach wrote over here. What?
The three Aremi Klat that are the Israel did.
Yes.
Relevant anymore?
No. I mean, we have to reestablish those things. You have to give back Orei Levia. You have to redo everything. And Bate or Ichoma, the Rambam says, read it in here. There's going to be a whole big reset in Third Temple times or Third Commonwealth times. But first, let's get to Rav Kapach. Okay. Varshalu Rabim, Mahi Adifuta Shel Kezkat Ole Bavel, Mechezkat Ole Mitzrayim. Many have asked this question: what's the preference, or why is this Chazaka of the Ole Bavel, they grabbed onto the land, somehow better than what the Ole Mitzrayim did? These sanctified the land only temporary, but they succeeded in forever. Okay? V'zo kedusha l'shata v'atla idea kibush hachozer. Utshuvot v'terutzim rabim ne'amru davar. Many answers and terutzim have been said in this manner. V'reiti mi shekatav d'chezkat ole Mitzrayim hi ketotzah min hakibush v'hakibush v'itlo. I saw people write that. Well, what did the Ole Mitzrayim do? They conquered. So Babylonians conquered it, it got ruined. Machon Shilo Ole Bavel, he totzah shel matanash natan liYisrael mishaita aretz biado kilomar koresh. The second time around, it was actually given to the Jews as a gift. Cyrus gave it to them. Aidech razato mi bachem mikol amo Hashem l'kavimo v'ya'al v'reichal lehadin shin paresh the off the zachiu matana. Okay, so it's like what we saw in the laws of basically gift giving. It's one of the Rambam's ones. It's in the first parak. The goy sheik nal Yisrael yatzat mereshut hagoy v'chozman shelo echzik ba Yisrael hakoneh hareu kehefker. When once a Gentile gives over something to a Jew, it actually just becomes hefter until the Jew or some Jew picks it up. So some other Jew grabs onto it first, he gets it. You ever hear of that idea?
Nope.
Yeah, it's in the Gemara there. It's in above Basra. Afkan, Kevin Shemisra Koresh Bachazato Yatsa Mershuto, Matal Komakom Shechziku Hagzrei Shalhem Lulam, the Chule. Some or other, Koresh gave it to the Jews. Whichever Jew grabs it, it's his. Yeah, but what if the Gentiles grab it back? Just like Koresh got it, Koresh could get it back. Okay? So this is one of those answers. But
again,
here,
also according to that reason, then modern day Israel would all be
yes. So here's what I wanted to say. Notice what the Rambam says about the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash, its kedusha lasted forever. Why? Because the pasuk said so. Okay? There are psukim that describe what the Rambam's saying.
Okay.
Sefer Bamidbar has, in a number of places, also Sefer Devarim, what? Specific orders. Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the Am Yisrael, organize into an army. Okay, right? That's what the first count is in Bamidbar. Every Nasi is a general. All the men who are counted are aged 20 to 60, and they're arranged by army, by thousands, by hundreds, a military structure, and they are the ones who are going to fight to conquer the land, and among them, the land will be divided once the conquering is done, right? That generation failed. New generation, new division. Here we have each tribe lined up, like the Nesiv wrote. Those who show up to be counted are the ones who are going to be fighting to hold on to the land. B'nai Gad and B'nai Reuven say, we don't necessarily want to fight, we just want to hold on to this. Moshe Rabbeinu says, don't ruin it for everybody. The mitzvah is, and I'm commanding Yeshua, you're going to start a conquest. Yeshua's main job is to fight. Milchemes mitzvah. He's going in there. We should not make this any mistake about this. It's unequivocal. Here is a map. It's described in Parshas Maseh. This is what you're supposed to conquer from basically, Nachal Mitzrayim all the way here. Here's the borders. That's where you're to make war. Kill all these people who are there. Destroy their idolatrous places. Divide the land among the Jews. Right? It's unmistakable to understand that. Moshe Rabbeinu says, you know what we did to Sichon and Og? A few times Sefer Devarim he says this. You know what we did to Sichon and Og and took their territory through war? That is what you are going to do. And that is what Sefer Yeshua is about. And also the beginning of Sefer Shoftim. That's what King David continued. It is unmistakable that that's the way that Eretz Yisrael is to be sanctified. Right?
Okay.
That's what it says. But
You're saying it's dependent on them kicking out everyone that's in there?
no, I'm saying it's dependent on what God told them to do when they came back.
Okay.
But the second time around, after the base of Mikdash was destroyed, and the Jews are in Bavel and they're told to go back, no Navi came and said, go back and organize into an army, and here is your commander-in-chief. Zerubbabel was just told to do what? Bring the Jews back, settle the cities. It says in Sefer Ezra. They came back through Yerushalayim, built them as back and started, and then they settled their cities. Because what were they told to do? Just go back. Just go back. Chagai, the Navi came to them. They said, well, things are not going so good. Maybe we should build the base of Mikdash. Why are things so bad? And the Navi came and said, what are you waiting to build the base of Mikdash for? You already had a mitzvah. You're not supposed to wait for me to tell you to do this. You were supposed to have done this already. And those midrashim we saw, like the Kuzari is saying, my Kudat Kerpa, the Jews were supposed to go back. The beginning of the Messianic era was the beginning of the Second Temple era. If the Jews had just gone back, like the Kuzari says, like the Medrash says, right? That was what it expected them. Just go there. You don't have to fight to get Eretz Yisrael the second time around. They were never told to do so. They never had to do so. The promise was just go there. And if you all go there, the Beis Hamikdash will once again have the Shekhinah inside perfectly. All the commandments will come back into force. All the prophecies of Nechama would come true. You just have to go. It's just a numbers game, remember?
Yeah.
It's just a numbers game. That's all it was the second time around. Because that's what the Nevi'im promised them. And that was always the condition. By the way, that's what's expected of us until this point. The Second Temple era is just continuing to today. If you just go there, and that's what we see happening on the Temple Mount right now. You don't need to conquer the Temple Mount. You don't need to rebuy it from Ornan Hayavusi. You just have to make sure that all the Jews are there, and then it'll happen. If everybody was here now, that would be the redemption, as long as we're keeping the Torah, by the way. Okay? We just have to be here, and you own it. You already conquered it once. That's what Rambam said in the second halacha. All it takes is to conquer it once. That makes it Eretz Yisrael and available. And now you have to sit there. So Oli Bavel, all they had to do was take over certain areas, and that's there. If the Oli of Bavel had taken over the entire Oli Mitzrayim area, there'd be no nafkamina in geography. What's considered territory of Oli Mitzrayim or just Oli Bavel? They could have taken over the whole thing. The Kibush only had to be done once. The revelation of where the Beis Hamikdash has to be. God only have to tell you where the Beis Hamikdash is once, and from evermore, you know where to put it. You don't need a Navi to come and tell you again, build the Beis Hamikdash. God only had to reveal who the Kohanim are once. Now you know the Kohanim are Aaronites. You don't need another Navi to come and tell you, Kol Amar Hashem, those people are supposed to serve the Beis Hamikdash. Once David was chosen, you don't need a Navi to ever come again and tell you the chosen people are there. It's sufficient to find a kosher Davidian and make him your king, and you're doing the mitzvah that way. You don't need to know that if he's specifically chosen by God, because he's already from that group. You don't need to reconquer Eretz Yisrael. You did it once already. Since the first conquering, you didn't have to do anything. You were removed, so now you come back. You have a Chazaka. You were supposed to be here already. That was what the mitzvah was. That's what the Nevi'im told him. It's a few times in Sefer Yeshayahu that way. Tze'umi Bavel. Just leave Bavel. No specific commandment to organize into armies by tribe and to fight and apportion the land among the fighting men aged 20 to 60. Instead, just go back and take it. That's what Sefer Ezra is telling you. That's what Navis have said all along.
Okay.
That's it. That's how the Kedusha works.
Why doesn't it go away then?
Why does it go away? Because we're still that. We are still expected, like Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Bar Bar Chana. I hate you Babylonians. It's your fault that this whole thing didn't work out. But Reish Lakish was telling this to him about 800 years after the Beis Hamikdash was first rebuilt and centuries after it had been destroyed. The fact is that if the Jews of Bavel and Eretz Yisrael, and the Gullahs had just come back to Eretz Yisrael all along in Maccabean times, in Hillel's time, Shimon HaTzadik's time, that would have been the Geula. That's what God's expecting, and that's what God still expects, and that's what Rabbi Yehuda Levi wrote in the Kuzari. God's just expecting us to come back already, and that was the key to, by the way, successful Zionism. You just be here and you win. You just have to be here, and that's why I think that Rabbi Schaff is correct in what he's saying halachically, that Jews can live outside of Eretz Yisrael and they can live wherever they want, etc. But you can make your decision to live in California. It's a perfectly legitimate halachic decision for you personally. But eventually the Gentiles are just going to veto that decision and they're going to Holocaust you there, right? That he forgot about that essential part. And secondly, if you want to succeed in Eretz Yisrael, you have to come to Eretz Yisrael. You have to be here. That's all. It's a numbers game. The answer is you don't have to storm the Temple Mount. Just do the Chazaka. Things will improve. Okay, and that's why walking around the Temple Mount is not Kibush. It's Khazaka. But that's still a very good thing. Okay?
Again, that means, according to what you said, the Maimonidean opinion is that the current border of Israel from Eilat until the Galil are all of Kedusha.
Yeah, they should be. The Rambam also said that we should be counting Shemitah and Yovel differently. The Rambam's saying basically that we're behind what we're supposed to do. I believe that if Rashi today were around, he'd say, why didn't you build the Beis Hamikdash already? And by the way, whose time was that? They brought Ethiopians back, right? Yes. They brought Ethiopians back like, oh, good, the Gullus is over. Wait, where's the Beis Hamikdash? I mean, you don't keep laws of Tum and Torah? You didn't rebuild the Beis Hamikdash? What's wrong with you? Isn't that what you wanted to do all along? Okay, it's a question. The Rambam did not elaborate on this one because the Rambam assumed the Beis Hamikdash has eternal sanctity because that's what it says in the Navi. That's what it says in Sefer Tehillim. And Kibush was the way you're supposed to go about doing it. Why? Because there's so much Torah about the first time around about this whole army thing and conquering, and that's how you do it. And it's contingent on that. But the second time around, you were promised, go back there, settle it, and that'll be the redemption. And the only reason why the redemption didn't happen is because you didn't do that. But once you finally come back to Eretz Yisrael and you just chazaka the entire thing, and all of Am Yisrael comes, unlike they didn't do in Second Temple times, that would be the redemption. You're just waiting for it. The answer was in front of us all along. Yeah, and that's it.
I still don't understand what the difference is where
the
first Galut, Kedusha went away. And the second Galut, it doesn't.
Second Galut is just a setback. Okay? The second Galut is just bringing us back to a little bit to where we were at the end of the first Galut. The problem, the promise of the first Galut was, now you come back and you'll have it. Bring yourselves back.
Okay.
So you just have to bring yourselves back. We've been basically in a situation where we've been living in a delayed Messianic era since Second Temple times.
Okay, but in the first Aliyah, Zerubbabel, the land wasn't holy until they actually showed up.
Yeah.
So if they was kicked out,
once they started showing up, once they started the process, the Kedusha happens. And if they had settled, like you said, to Eilat, if they had settled Beit Sha'an, it wouldn't go there. And even today, if we'd settled Beit Sha'an area, there would be sanctity there. That's why I don't believe, by the way, there's a heter. Rav Kapach and others write about this. There's Arava places, which they think is beyond Ole Bavel territory. So Shemitah doesn't apply there. That's where they get lettuce, kosher lettuce. Without acknowledging that, but it's part of now. I wrote about this, it must have been 10 years ago when I started writing about this, that, wait a second, it's implied in a few passages in the Talmud that the Ole Bavel period, that extending Kedusha to Ole Bavel areas, wasn't just one generation, it was over many generations, even over Hasmonean generations. The Hasmoneans got to that place in their Hasmonean conquest, which is conquest, by the way, but they start settling with Jews hundreds of years after the building of the second Beis Hamikdash, and they consider that Ole Bavel. That is, as long as the second temple was standing, wherever Jews went to live in Eretz Yisrael, in parts that had previously been conquered by David and Yeshua, those became parts of Kedushas Ole Bavel. until the second temple was destroyed. Because that was the first thing you have to do. First, build the temple, and then wherever you go, that's a chazaka. So that's, by the way, so what we have today, we should build the Beis HaMikdash, and we should do things, and Memela, wherever the Jews are settled, that's part of halachic Eretz Yisrael.
To make it part of halachic Eretz Yisrael, you need a Beis HaMikdash.
Maybe you do, yeah. Or you could just say now it's part of the third Commonwealth. The Commonwealth has started. The destruction, the Roman destruction of the second temple basically ended the Commonwealth also, ended the Malchus. So it might be continued on Malchus in Israel, Commonwealth. Okay? Jewish independence. Yeah. So there you go. It's obviously I'm just one guy. There's more. It's more complicated than that. And a Sanhedrin decides these things. But I'm trying to explain what I believe the Rambam is telling you. The fact is, the Rambam took this pashtus. He says this kedusha was eliminated and this kedusha wasn't. Why? Because that kedusha was the way the Nevi'im described it is going to be put into play with conquest, and it will be removed. And this kedusha, in the words of the Nevi'im, is not through conquest, right? Just go back, and it was meant to last forever, and it still lasts forever if we would just be here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I said kalu kol akitzim. Really, the Messiah was supposed to come a long time ago. If he's not here yet, it's only because we haven't done it yet.
Okay.
Yeah, very simple. The Geula was here already. Just didn't, we just ruined it.
Okay, so halacha.
Yeah.
Does that mean all the places within the current borders of Israel should be chashish for shmita, tumot, masot?
Yeah, I really believe so. I mean that's the point, and that's certainly what the Rambam would say. Okay, there's a biashlishis. Things are restarting. We have to do things right. It's kind of a joke to say, oh, it's not Eretz Yisrael because we're not there. Beit Sha'an was originally Jewish, and then it's part of Oli Mitzrayim, right? But not part of the Oli Bavel area. Why? Because it was fully full of Goyim. Okay, until Rabbi Yonassi's time. But now it's Jewish. Okay, so we'll leave it there.